Hey everybody. So my name's Scott Gershin. I am the audio director and I don't know, what am I? I'm the creative director and director of editorial at the Sound Lab at Technicolor. And we've been with Technicolor now for about 2 years. And we're heading up the immersive unit at the company. And I've got with me some wonderful people that I work with. To my left is Debbie Gonzalez. She's our executive producer of both music and biz dev. She has a huge background in music and some really great, enlightening thoughts. To my left here is Johannes Hammers, who is a composer extraordinaire. We've been working a lot together lately. You know, I've worked with many composers. He's got this great, wonderful ability to create great melody that you don't get tired of. And it just hits the emotional thread. And I think that's hugely important in all the mediums we work in. And to my right, the guy who we're all going to work for one day, Jesse Garcia. He was our asset manager. Now he's gone into sound design. He's doing an amazing job. And he's also been kind of heading up a lot of our dialogue work that he's been doing this year and has just a wonderful wealth of knowledge. And you know, it's important as a team that when we work on projects, we're not isolated. We're constantly talking to each other and figuring out with the clients how to get the best project for them. And what I do love is being able to communicate with composition and dialogue and assets. And you know, there's so much movement within a project that we have to turn on a dime. It's great that we're all in communication with each other. So I think that's really great. You know, we're going to talk about today how to organize projects, how to work with outside vendors, the things that we've found out, and many of the things that we sit down with our clients early on when we first start projects, and we kind of do a 20 questions thing. We try to help guide them through the process of you know, how we're going to support them with their audio needs. So the first process we do is when they come in is everything from, hi, I got a project, we're going to be on every format, whether it's mobile games, AAA, VR, AR, you know, and so we need to kind of drill down a little bit and understand what their needs are. So the first person at the door they see is Debbie. And I'm going to hand over to Debbie and have her talk about the process that she's involved and talk about all the that process.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Debbie.
So one of the things that we've found most helpful in working with clients is really establishing up front a really good, solid budget for what the expectations are for the project. And many times we see the gamut from, we work on very small projects and casual games to AAA projects and everything in between. One of the things that we see a lot is clients will come to us and they won't be very organized and not for a lack of not wanting to be organized, but not knowing how to organize themselves. So part of what we wanted to talk about today and kind of how we wanted to approach this roundtable is to kind of almost make it like a conversation we're having with somebody who calls us and says, hey, I need sound for my game. Can you tell me what to do? What do I need to do? The budget's very important because obviously if you don't budget it correctly, you're going to have problems. We want to make sure that you're not spending more money than you need to, but that you're getting creatively the very, very best of what we can give. One of the things that we've seen a lot, especially in the casual world of late, is the desire for us to provide a budget based on a price per asset. Not our favorite way to work. And there's many reasons why, and I'm going to go into a little bit of why that is. It's possible, but not preferable. Basically, when you come to a sound company, you're paying for somebody's time. there's another widely accepted practice of throwing a huge, amount of money and saying it'll cost this much and we'll just stay on it until we're done. I don't think most clients have budgets like that anymore. Everybody wants to know what I'm paying for and wants to creatively know that they're getting the best bang for their buck, so to speak. So when you're doing a price per asset, it's almost like asking somebody how much, if you were a contractor building a house, how much would it cost me to build a house? Can't tell you until you tell me how big you want the house, how many rooms you want in the house, how many bathrooms, all of that.
Or how much it'll cost to make one window.
Right, to make one window. Exactly. So an example of that would be some of the clients that we've worked with this is the way they work, this is the way they insist on working, and you certainly can do that, but it forces the sound people creatively to kind of narrow down, okay, what would it cost me to create one UI sound? Well, think about that for a second. What is a UI sound? A UI sound could be something very, very simple, and it's not going to require a lot of attention in the game, and it's going to be buried behind things, or it's not going to be a hugely important sound, so it doesn't require a lot of attention. Or that could be the one sound that is so important in your game, it's going to be the signature sound. If that's the case, you're going to want to spend more time on it, you're going to want more energy put into it. I think Scott was telling me in the car on the way down of one story of, was it JFK?
Yeah, occasionally when we start talking about signature sounds, not just sound effects, but signature sounds, the JFK gunshot took me 2 weeks before Oliver and everybody approved it off.
On one sound.
On one sound.
Right.
Sometimes signature sounds, when I did Tarzan,
right,
we were talking about 4 months to get the yodel. It's not that it took me 4 months to figure out a yodel. and it didn't take me, 2 weeks to do one gunshot. But the hard thing about the gunshot was Kevin Costner speaks really low. And the gunshot's going to go, and Pro Tools didn't exist. So there was a lot of effects and a lot of outboard gear. But the point is, it's about the approval process and how long that takes.
Right, exactly. And so really hard to narrow down a price per asset, but if you're kind of forced to do it, you can kind of come up with something. But what I found inevitably happens is that somewhere along the journey, as you're working on projects together, you find that you couldn't put the time that you wanted to put into that sound because the budget didn't support it, because you were forced to provide a price per asset. And I think creatively, clients are inevitably disappointed to a degree sometimes when you try to work that way. So a favorable way to work, in our opinion, is to base the whole budget on time and materials. And that starts with a very in-depth creative conversation about what is your project? What are you looking to accomplish? What's important about your project? Are there bosses? Are there creatures that need special sounds? Do they need personalities? Do we need to do vocalizations? And really narrowing down the important aspects of that project. And then we can decide to focus the budget on those things and put something together that's going to create get the most value for your dollar. The other thing that it can be difficult sometimes is when the project is running longer than expected because visuals don't come when they're supposed to. So another topic that we address in the initial creative conversation is the schedule. Very, very important. We can't really give you an accurate budget without having an idea of your schedule, of when your visuals are going to be ready. A lot of times people will give us an initial schedule, and they'll say, this group of assets is going to be ready here, this group of assets is going to be ready here, and this one's going to be ready here, and we want you to start working back here on this first round. And oftentimes we'll say, hang on, why don't you wait, bring us in later, because there's economies of scale. If, going back to the analogy of building a house, if you call a contractor for the day and say, I want you to paint the inside of my house, but I just want you to paint the kitchen this week, and then come back and paint the bedrooms next week, and then do the bathrooms in 3 weeks, they're going to charge you every day they have to come back. if you've got a person in a room designing sound and you can accomplish all of these groups of sounds in that time that you have them in that room, you're going to save the budget there as well. So oftentimes we end up having the conversation of, we think you should wait to bring us on. We think we should come on during this time, and we should maybe go a little wider, put a couple more people on it, but really have your visuals ready to go before we even get started. And that can be a very effective way to maximize the budget. And the third thing is, oftentimes on AAA titles, there's large quantities of Foley or a dialogue that needs to be edited. And one of our favorite ways to work with large-scale projects like that is with something called a not-to-exceed budget, which works really well. If you have this huge amount of dialogue or Foley that needs to be edited, you don't really know it. You're guessing at how much time it's going to take to do that, and it's really hard to narrow that down. And we don't want to overcharge, and you don't want to undercharge either, because you need to make a little money, but you also don't want to be gouging anybody. So if you can get an amount approved that you think is close, that you're not going to exceed, and then we can track it and bill against that amount as we go, and then at the end, you're only paying for what you actually used. And sometimes that works really well for clients on AAA games. That way they can go through their approval process, get this amount of money signed off on, and then they just pulling from this bucket that they have approved. And that makes things go really smoothly in terms of having to track what you're doing and keeping the budget on track. So.
And I also say this. Obviously we're talking about money. The goal of a project is to create an experience for the player, no matter what we're doing, whether it's VR, mobile games. And at some point, we have to figure out where are we going. I mean, look, everybody would love the best and spend 2 years on a project and do everything we could ever think of, an experiment to nth degree. And reality is that's not always the case. So we always have to figure out ways of working smarter, figuring out how to optimize everybody's time. It's the same thing. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times I want to hire 10 people, and I'd love to be on projects for a long time. It's not going to happen. So the whole point is then, how do we work smarter? How do we, at the end of the day, get our clients to be effective to getting that creative process to the player? Because that's ultimately, that's all that matters, is making sure that the player, that the user just walks away from that personal experience going, wow, that was great. And ultimately, that's our goal. We just have to figure out how to get there.
Yep, absolutely.
Did you want to talk about some of the music side?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the music side of things, getting away from sound design, one of the things that we hear a lot from people is, I think all we can afford is licensed music. And I think that's a misconception sometimes, that licensed music always is less expensive than doing original composition. So again, we like to have a very in-depth creative conversation at the start of a project before we kick anything off and have all the details lined up. But one of the things that we like to explore is, are you sure that you really want to do licensed music here? And sometimes we might start a project thinking that's what we're going to be doing, and especially when it comes to scoring to picture. If it's not background music, and it's something that's going to be hitting points within the game or within a cinematic, really can be difficult to find music to cut up that's going to work effectively. And sometimes it's just more cost effective to have a composer start and just write a piece of music specifically for that piece visually that's going to hit all those points. To have somebody sitting in a room with a piece of music for hours trying to edit, it's never going to sound as good, and you're probably going to spend a ton of money just trying to edit it, together. It's similar to Foley. We have clients that call and say, hey, we'd love to go, we have a Foley stage, we'd love to go to the Foley stage and cut Foley, but I don't really have the budget for the Foley, so can you just do all the Foley pulling from a library? It's like, yeah, you can, but the reality is, depending on what you're trying to do, you're going to spend so much time and it's never going to sound as good. And Foley probably isn't as expensive as you think it is. And for what you're going to gain, you probably aren't going to pay all that much. You might even end up saving money, depending on what it is. So these creative points really need to be addressed going into the project so that you can best achieve the creative results you want at the end. So with music, I love working with Johannes. He's a fabulous composer and an amazing sound designer. We've been working together for far many years than I want to admit. But one of the things that we always talk about is let's really think about whether this piece really should be composed, or can we accomplish what we need to do with library music? Is it a combination? Do we license some pieces and then maybe get the stems for those and manipulate the stems and make it a combination? But it's a discussion to have at the beginning of a project, and you can change in the middle of the project and kind of shift gears and say, you know, we thought this was going to work, but I think we really do need to, we thought licensing was going to work, but we really do think we need to compose some segues here.
Yeah, we did that recently.
Yeah.
Where we had, because there's only so much you can do with a licensed track. You know, and especially when you're trying to forward or push a story, you know, you have your licensed track, you don't have the stems. So original music, there's nothing like it. And the great thing is, like in mobile games too, where you're dealing in maybe 8-bar loops or 12-bar loops, you know, you can really get in there and craft things that blend together and segue and transition together, especially when you're going from one level to another, level changes, character changes. It's, you can get much more impactful with original music. I mean, there's, you know, licensed music, there's a place for it, and it's great. We did one project recently where we used licensed music for a source. You know, it was a point source in a VR experience. There was a Victrola in a corner, and we used you know, it was a track that you couldn't recreate because it was a classical piece. So in that case, you know, a licensed track is perfect. Right. But yeah.
And also I think that one piece that you're referring to, it set the tone for that environment, because it was kind of a orchestral classical piece.
Right.
That people went, oh, I know exactly where we're at, I know what we're doing, and it set up the scene. So that's where, because there's source music, it gave a lot of information to the viewer as to what's going on. I think the thing, though, we talk about through kind of the drop of the needle kind of music, if you're going to want a piece of music that is going to be memorable, thematic, it's going to kind of be owned by that IP. So when you hear that, you automatically go, oh, that's so-and-so game or so-and-so piece of product. If it is licensed, it's going to be in lots of different products.
Right, it's hard to secure an exclusive license for a mobile game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but if you're doing original, you own it. That's your property, and that becomes part of your brand.
And they get to play it when you go up to get an award. You know, they get to play the theme.
Play your theme.
So what are the challenges do you find, Johannes, in the box, out of the box, live players? You know, what are some of the ways you like to work?
Well, working in the box is ultimate flexibility. I mean, when you do everything in the computer, the libraries are so good now, the orchestral sounds are so accurate, you can pretty much do a mock-up that is very convincing. And especially on, you know, earbuds, even though your headphones, you're there, you're with the music, when you blend it with the sound effects, it's very convincing. But that said, you know, there's nothing like being on a stage with live players. If you can afford that, you know, back to the budget, that's always the number one way to go. But the other thing with composing in the box and producing in the computer is you have that ultimate flexibility. We need to change the tempo. We need to change the key. We need to substitute this instrument for another instrument. Then you can work up to that up to your deadline to the minute before you kick out your final mix.
Which we did recently on a project,
Which
we
we
can't
just
name,
finished,
unfortunately.
yeah.
But it was like, can you speed up? Can you slow it down? Can we try this? Can we try this? And there was so many iterations because there was so many people that were weighing in the creative process that really helped, I think, a lot.
But, I mean, if you're working in the box and you want a live sound or a live character, you can just add one instrument, two instruments, you know, a single violin, a solo singer can completely change the character of a track. You can go from, oh my gosh, this sounds a little bit synthetic, to I'm buying this. I'm completely immersed in this experience, and it's for real.
And this one product we're talking about, the one that shall be not named at this point, is also interactive. So interactive music's kind of really cool. And there's many ways to do that. You can do the Ableton style where you're just playing little regions of music that happen. But we kind of took a three-dimensional approach. We did layers and different types of different pieces. So based on how our player was playing, the music became very interactive to what was going on. So every experience and every player would get a slightly different musical performance. And that's something we talk about a lot, and interactive music, I think, is really important to a lot of different types of gameplay.
And that's one of the conversations that we have early on after we talk to the clients, is the role of music and the role of sound effects and how those two things go together. And that's a great thing about having a team that works together, all in the same building most of the time, is that you have these conversations where, you know, what's music's role, what's the sound design role, when to stop the music, when to start it, you know, how it all works together.
And what engine you use. Because they go, yeah, we want to do all this great stuff. We got Unity Audio, okay? And so we're like, oh, yeah, okay. Can we get into like YSF mod, anything else? You know, and that's a big conversation which we have at the very beginning of projects. You know, it's almost like when Debbie and I talk to clients and our whole crew talks to clients, we almost do the whole process backwards. Where do you want to end up? How do you want to understand the process of what we're going to do? What do we need to deliver? What is your dream? What is your vision? What is it that this project's going to do? What role does audio play within the project? It could be leading the charge, or it can be, in this one project, we did everything. On one hand, the source music was playing a much supportive role. In other areas, it was driving the energy. So again, that's something that we sit down and we try to understand what the clients want and how to best deliver it. You know, when we're talking, and Johannes and I, it's just wonderful working together, that I'll see what he's doing musically, and then design-wise, we'll find a way to complement it. Many times I've done projects, whether it's games, VR, AR, film, you name it, everybody goes off into their own little corner and does their most amazing work they can do. So the music's big and it's bold and it's just and the sound designer's big and he's bold and he's and the dialogue's got bass and everyone's bringing their full frequency game. Then you go through a mix or an integration and it's mush. It's just chaos. And then of course, if we're doing the audio implementation, or most likely our clients, we always get we're out of time. We got to deliver this. It's not exactly the way we want it. And we hear every audio director and every client does that. What I like to say is, we know that's going to happen. So let's plan for it and let's go backwards. Let's figure out. So if there's going to be, I'll go to Johannes, he goes, oh, I got this great contrabass. I'm going to do this low kind of with horns and stuff. I go, great. I'm not going to put a low-end rumble, because now we're going to conflict. Or he's going to go high strings in a minor second, and he's going to do that. Well, I'm not going to go with high-end wispy wind and shimmers, because we're going to clash.
And why would the client want to pay to have all this work done that's never going to get used, it's going to be pulled out because it clashes with everything else? So having, again, going back to those conversations in the beginning, you know, you're not wasting your time spinning your wheels.
And I always know the level of experience of a client, strange enough, by their footsteps. We need 200 footsteps. And I go, great, let's have a conversation. because sometimes that's a little ridiculous even on the big projects. So we understand, because it's said in a design doc, that I've got X amount of characters that you need to have their own footsteps, they may need to have their own movement, but a lot of it's surface-based. And I mean, look, we could have a conversation about Foley all day long, but it's smart. And the question is, do you even need to hear footsteps? Do we want to keep hearing sometimes it's just annoying, or do we play it subtly, more of in movement of the chain of the body, and music's playing, and you don't really miss the big hits of the footsteps? Or the scene is where we're stalking and we don't want to be heard. Yeah, I want footsteps. And I want, like, oh, they heard me, I cracked a twig, and now everyone's going to start shooting at me. So that's a good Foley example. Sound design. What budget do you have? Where do you go? There's many philosophies. Do you go out and record? Do you take it from a library? There's different strategies, and as sound designers, my job is not to show you my chops. My job is not to show you how great I am. In reality, I believe great sound design and even music should be invisible. Not that you don't hear it, but that you don't care because you're going for the experience. If any one piece stands out, then I think you're taking the audience away from that experience. You just need to be really cool and really neat. So what does that mean? Some people go, oh, I would never use a sound idea as sound because it's been used. Sure, I mean, I understand it, but it might be the right sound. It might be that sound that's perfect for that project. And there shouldn't be any prejudice with that just because it came from a library that us sound designers know. At the end of the day, it's an audience. They just want to experience it. They want to hear it. They want to play it. They want to have fun. They want to do whatever we're trying to, whatever buttons we're trying to push. So there's that. So the question becomes, sometimes we want to hear sounds we've never heard. So we go out and record. Some sounds are not all created equal. Signature sounds. The big sound of the big creature, the big sword, the big weapon. Yeah, that's got to be unique. That's got to be something that doesn't come out of CD 105, index 2, or the door out of Hollywood Edge that I keep hearing all the time. Makes you crazy. So we have to prioritize because it's a budget. Some people, we've been on projects for 2 years, and there's a lot of custom work. Other projects, which what Debbie was alluding to, we're on it for 6 weeks. We're on it for 1 week. At that point, we need to get you to the church on time. I mean, we need to get you there to be able to do something cool because, people don't care. I think the other part is, especially in mobile, we hear it a lot. No one's going to hear the sound anyway. Why, let's just get something cheap, throw it from a library and put it in. I think between music and sound design, it's important for that not to happen. The goal is this is a medium which you get to hear a little bit of everything. I mean, it's got to be great visuals. When you look at great projects, there's not one great thing that was great. It's everything was great. Everything worked. Everything seemed to flow together. It's like a song. When you're a band and there's just like a great guitar player, but the bass and the drummer kind of suck, it's not great. Everyone's got to be on their game, and when you hear it, it's a wonderful experience. I'm going to check my notes here. Oh, yeah. One of the things I like to do on projects, and a lot of people do, I believe, the wrong way. They start with the backgrounds, they start with the quiet sounds and build themselves up to the loud sounds. It's not the way I like to work. I like to go backwards. Give me the biggest sounds, the largest sounds, the most important sounds. These are the sounds that have to be heard. Let's work on those first. Those are the priority. The Bee Gees, the wind, the crickets, whatever. I can get that really fast. If we're out of money, we can get to that pretty fast. You don't want to rush the biggest sounds, number one. Number two, which I see all the time in integration, is I can't get louder than loud. I'm already up there. And I see it all the time. If I start giving you sounds to implement and integrate, day one, these are your loudest sounds. After that, the sounds get quieter. And then what also happens is we may have thought we needed the asset, But little by little, we said, you know what? We built it, but we don't need it because we're not hearing it. Once we put in the weapons, the creatures, the music, now all of a sudden, the little creek by the brook water on the side, I don't care. I don't hear it. It's not that important. It's not strategic. So at that point, it gives you the ability to make a mix in real time as you're growing and as you're putting the project together. So many times I've seen just mush. Everybody's integrated. Everybody's made the sounds as loud as it can be. And then it gets to the end and it's ill-defined and it doesn't sound like a good mix. And again, we're out of time. We got to move. It is what it is. We'll do better on the next one. Integration is an interesting discussion. How it gets done, who gets, how long are the people on, what are we using, what tools are we using. All that has to be worked out at the beginning, but organization is everything. Sometimes we'll do a mobile game and it has maybe 100 sounds, 200 sounds. It's not that many. Then when you get to AAA, you've got, 3,000 lines of dialogue, and then you got to add many different languages, and all of a sudden we're talking thousands of sounds and different iterations, perspectives, and now all of a sudden we've been on it in, let's say, 2 years, 8 weeks, on, off. So we've been on it for 2 years, and then we go back and we said, oh crap, I can't find this one sound. And now we've got to figure out, I don't remember where it is. Did you deliver it? Did we not? And this at this point is where this genius over here saves the day.
So to start from the beginning for the assets role, to have what we call at least the assets department, and everything that I say of how we do this, it's not necessarily the right way. It's just a way of how we like to try to organize projects from the beginning. So from the very beginning, what happens is we start getting deliverables from a client. They start sending us things. Now, every client is organized a different way, and it doesn't mean that they're doing it right or wrong. It's just that sometimes we get, like for instance, I think that getting a capture of video from somebody, they give it to us. The better the capture that you can give, actually capturing the action of what's going on, like, hey, this is going to be the attack 1, this is going to be the attack 2, and naming the video like that gives us the idea that, okay, now we understand what this video is. The biggest problem that we see is somebody gives us one long 20-minute capture and they play the game, and they give it to us and they go, here's like a capture of someone playing the game. And it doesn't really work because I go, well, then you have to sit there for hours going, at what minute in your 20-minute capture is attack 5 from this character? And it just takes time, and we have no problem doing it, but we want to make sure that we work more efficiently and use your money wisely. As we've kind of been talking, the difference between going from casual to AAA. I've seen many AAA games that we've worked on that have been completely out of whack and not organized. And I've seen many casual games unorganized or organized. It has nothing to do with the fact of, oh, we're more casual. I mean, we try to make every game casual, and no games are casual to work on. We try to be. So the difference is that normally a AAA game, they have a team of people. They have that budget. They have a team of people who can sit there and they can make an asset sheet and they can make videos and capture everything and send it to us and be very well organized, which allows us to make better sounds for you and to give you an efficient workflow. So,
and I also wanted to say one thing that you were going. We see two problems, I think. We see one is where they just show us gameplay and say, here, figure it out, like you said. Mm-hmm. The other one is we'll get Maya files and we'll look at those and we'll start designing against it. And then you go, oh, okay, this thing is really small. And then you go, by the way, can I see it within gameplay? And you find like, oh, crap, it's 50 feet tall.
Yeah.
Or another one, you see a Maya thing and you go, oh, okay. And you go, I guess it's small. Or you don't know what size it is. The next thing you know, it's smaller than your kneecap down. But there's not one of them. There's 20 of them. And they're all swarming. We don't know that from the Maya files. So this way, getting a combination of the Maya files and how it exists in gameplay.
Yeah, we like to get both if possible. The Maya file gives us the most detail. The in-game gives us a good scale. So one of the first things that we do, that I would do in the assets department or whoever's running it at the time, is files would come in. We would ask the client, do you have an asset sheet? And the thing of that is actually, if we can go to our next slide, I can explain a way that we like to try to work. I kind of made it just just a simple temp sheet here. It's just an Excel document, right? And you know, we work in Excel a lot right now just because right now it's the easiest for us. Right. So sometimes clients will give us something similar to this. Now, what's great about this, if you look over at the sheet, is this has everything. Oh, as I spilled my water everywhere. Sorry, get them up. So one of the great things about this is file name is probably one of the most important. So, you know, it's similar, like character 1, look, this is going to be an attack, this is going to be a die, whichever way you want to do it. And then the file name is normally named of what the hook is in the game, right? Because if you don't give us the name that's actually in the game, we're going to name it the name of the video. And then your implementer is going to spend hours upon hours renaming the files to match your hooks or to match your code to make sure it goes in the game. We want to make sure that ours is going to match what you have. And then letting us know, you know, do you want this as a mono sound? Do you want it as a stereo sound? What's your sample rate that you can play? We send you all these files, and they go, look, we can only do 44.1 in this game. You have to fix everything. Okay, no problem. But something like this that you can hand over to your audio outsourcing team is going to help them be more efficient. So what we'll do is sometimes we get the sheets, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we'll make them ourselves. And we actually tell clients, look, have you made your hook names or have you made your asset names? And they say, no, we haven't. Do you have a problem if we make them for you? Yeah, no problem. And then they just emulate what we deliver back. So this sheet will get made. It will get sent out to every single editor who's working on the project. And it'll be like, this is the Bible. Do not make it different. So we'll go through and say, great, you need to make this many variations. This is the file name. And they will just pull from this every time they make it. Now, something Scott had mentioned is we're on a project for, let's say, 2 years, and we have to go back and look at files. It happens all the time. You know, hey, we made an edit on a file or an animation update. We kind of need you to go back in. We like what you did. We need you to update it, though, because we've changed animation. But we need all the same elements. No problem. So what we'll do is everything that I receive in, I log into like a received folder with the date. So I know exactly when, at what time, we got these files from our client. That way that there's no discrepancy. We know we have. Then we take everything, we organize them into our template just to make sure the editors have it. When we send a file out, we always use the exact same name of the project, then the date, and then we append kind of, you know, here's what we're sending you. And then that reflects as we make a couple of columns on the left of this sheet and we document that. We sent a final asset. We sent a preview. With, this one needs a fix update. This one needs that. It's just documenting. That's all it is. And we document all that. So at any point in time, you can tell me, hey, we worked on this project 3 years ago and they want this sound. Okay, I'm going to go to the sheet. I'm going to sort it by date. I'm going to find the date and I'm going to say, great, we sent it on the 15th of December in 2014. Great. Go to the project, look in my sent folder, go to that date, grab it, here's your file. It's that simple.
One thing I want you to talk about is, with the time that we have left, is that, and it's a perfect example, when you did the dialogue project.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that, yeah. Yeah, so, you know, like you can think like we were talking before, 100 files, we still organize it the same way, no matter what, always, 10 files, 100 files. Recent project we did a lot of the battle chatter dialogue for the latest Call of Duty project. It's around 80,000 lines of dialogue, right? And that was just the English. So we've worked on projects before. One of the projects I worked on a while ago, it was like 1.2, 1.3 million lines of dialogue. They all have separate names. They all have different organs. They're all in different bins working. They all have different languages, whatever it may be. I made a sheet, took the sheet, and literally had every line in that sheet. The good thing was the client gave us something with all their take numbers so that we could actually reflect to the session they gave us. The organizational of that was so important that it's a full-time job. And the hard thing is that when you have a game company that doesn't have the budget to have something like this, a lot of times that goes by the wayside. And it's like, oh, well, we have to, because it's really hard to put your creative hat on and then put your analytical hat on and be like, okay, I just finished editing and designing. Now let me go through and make sure we have everything logged in. And a lot of times that gets put by the wayside. And then what happens is you put everything into your game, you hit play, and you go, why is the Russian dialogue playing? I have English selected. And it happens. It totally happens because it's just not organized. And then you go back and you're looking for everything. So we set up, everyone works differently. We set up a template for working in every session was the exact same name with, like the front, the back, the whole thing, and then the descriptor is what was different. That was logged in the session, who was working on it, what status they were working at, and what the file delivery names were. So at any point in time, I can go in and say, Scott was editing the Russian dialogue for this. I can find it in his backup folder. There it is. It was all really, really like simple. But you had to have somebody working full time on this because 80,000 lines of dialogue and something's going to get misplaced. So that's really one of the big things that we make sure we go on is organizational from front to back. You know, and the first conversations that Debbie has with the clients, saying one of the things that we always talk about is what platform, what type of thing are you releasing on? You know, how are you doing this? And the reason for it is because that allows me to know, okay, this is what I'm going to be receiving from our client, what type of video files, and you know, anything that you can do to help us on that. So we like to send out a sheet that says, look, if possible, and I know it's hard in games, can you give us this type of codec or anything like that so we can work in Pro Tools? Because when we work in Pro Tools, we can't really put in certain MP4s, we can't put in Fraps captures, which I can't stand. But we get the captures, we get the Fraps capture, and we have to transcode it. That's why we have this department as well. Transcode it, get it ready for the editors to come in and work. Because if we don't have that, imagine if I told you, you were like, hey, how's the progress going? Oh, it's going pretty good. You know, we spent the first day transcoding video. We spent the second day making our asset sheet. We billed you for it, too. You know, and then the third or fourth day, we kind of started designing, so we don't have anything for you yet. You're going to be like, huh? So we have a department for that so that we can actually go in, get that stuff done before the editors come in and we can work efficiently. So that's kind of the reason why we have that type of department. And I think that it's more important for anybody to have this department sometimes than having so many different sound designers. Like, it's important to have them, but if you have nothing organized at the end of the day, when I'm sending files back to you, how are you going to get your files, right? Which leads me into like probably the last topic of this role is the first conversation I have with whoever it is on the other side of the client we're working for is, how would you like file deliveries to go? What works best for you? We have a system that we like that just works best for us for security and for efficiency. We like using Aspera links. We send Aspera to people back and forth, which is kind of standard. But you know, you have one company that says, hey, you know,
everything.
Well, we use everything. I mean, we have one company that says, oh, Aspera is the safest, blah, blah, blah. And then we have another company that says, oh, we're not approved to use Aspera. Our safest bet is Google Drive. I mean, it doesn't matter. So, I mean, we use Box, we use Google Drive, we use Dropbox, we use, I mean, anything that our client wants, we figure out how to do because we want to be flexible, right? But I like to try to create a systematic so I don't just send files that just say like, here's the 4 files from today, you know, because then imagine trying to track that later. Hey, when did you send that file? I think the delivery name said 4 files today, and I didn't write the date, so I just said today. Oh, well, let's hope that Mac, you know, their date modified tracked it correctly, which it never does. So I don't live by that. I write it in the delivery. So let's just say, let's say the project name was Technicolor, and that was our client. That was the project. My first delivery would probably be Technicolor, 2018. I'd have the date like, you know, like 01. What's the 18th? 0118. Boom. There's the date. Underscore descriptor. Preview files or character 5 preview. That's fine, because then you have everything in there. But I know that if I create that first bat, if you just sort by name, your deliveries are going to go from top to bottom perfectly. They will just organize by date, by default, so that it's very organized. So when I send stuff to clients, it is right there, and it's easy to find, and especially if it's like a Dropbox, they can always go back and refer to the files. And we have it tracked on our end. I mean, we had a project. It was a little while ago, I think, and they had given us a flash drive of like this field recording they did. And it was like 40 gigs of field recording, something like that. And you know, they got everything back, and it was like 2 months, 3 months later, and they said, look, crazy enough, we didn't back up that information and our hard drive died. We lost the entire field recording, like 2 weeks worth of field recording. Any chance you guys have it? I said, yeah, of course we do. Found the log, looked at the sheet, there it is, boom, sent it right back to them. In 15 minutes, they had it. You know, we keep everything. So being organized is just key, knowing how to put stuff in. I mean, I work with Johannes all the time with sound design or composing, and when we're doing music and talking to the implementers and saying, what loops do you need, what this and that, a lot of times it gets chaotic. I'm sure if you guys have, you know, working with implementers or implementing yourself, and it just gets to a point sometimes where it's like, oh, we figured out something implementing, we actually need a 15-second loop of that, and nothing was documented. So then what happens, very easy to just hey, Johannes, create the loop, boom, the loop, send it out, and then all of a sudden a year later, did we create a loop for that? It's not on the sheet. I don't think we created it. So the first thing I'll do is say, oh, we're creating a loop. What's it for? Okay, it's a loop for this. Great. Logging it on the sheet, have it. He makes it, send it out, track it, done.
And we've also on projects sometimes have different producers, different implementers, different clients change hands.
Oh, yeah.
So when we've been on projects, we've had several people on the same project, and they don't know what the other people did. So the more organized, the better.
Yeah, definitely.
I was just going to say that was the hardest thing to get used to, coming over to
Yeah.
games as a composer, is being organized.
Yeah.
Because it just did not compute, but it is so key. And
Right?
thank you.
Yeah, it really is key, just having a central form of information. And that's why we like to, right now, we seem to be using, Google Drive a lot for that, just because we can have multiple people on the same sheet. So when it updates, everybody kind of gets the update information crystal clear. And like I said, this is not the only way to do it. I just think whatever way works for you to stay organized is the best, because if whoever has your project and you use, like Scott said, the ending result, you just want a good product, right? The more organized you can be in the beginning, when you're coming to an audio outsourcing team or somebody like us, the better vision that we're going to be able to give you. We're going to be able to say, great, everything you gave us is crystal clear. I know where attack 1 is, attack 2 is, because I can't tell you how many times we've done attack 1 and they're like, that's attack 4. What? That's not attack 1, and we're implementing it, and now it's wrong because of the 1 and the 4, and we're like, oh, you had no idea. I don't know. You gave us a capture. And that's what we tried to ask you, and you were busy, and giving anybody, if you're already outsourcing, as organized as possible, you're going to get a better product.
One of the things is we decided when we were asked to maybe talk at this event what we wanted to talk about. Many times in the past we've spoken about creativity. I can tell you the coolest things we did, the recordings we did, and the cool sound design and music and all the stuff. But there's a reoccurring thing that we've seen, and that is time management. Ultimately, when you hire an audio team, I don't care who it is, you want them to be creative. You want them to spend most of their time being creative, building your product, making it amazing. But it's all about time management, that if they're spending their time, one of the reasons we have an asset department is we didn't want our designers to stop and work on assets. Again, it's not the best use of their time. So when you hire us, it's all about working smart. It's all about when do we work, how do we work, when do we stop? All of a sudden, if we find we don't have visual assets, we want to be off the payroll. Our job is not to get as much money as we can from you. Our job is to hire us, or any audio team, to do a great product. You've got a budget, everybody's got a budget, and you want to do the best work you have within the constraints of that project. And that's what we wanted to address here. We wanted to talk about some of the things, how we get projects as they come in, the challenges we face. It's not as much interesting on the creative side, but this is a necessity because we need to get this solved so we can be creative. So we minimize the amount of time we use in doing logistics and doing all the mechanical side of it, and really spend the most amount of time, the most amount of your budget being creative. So that's kind of who we are, what we are, and what we thought we would contribute to this conference. I know we're kind of running out of time, and most people are at lunch. But does anybody have any questions? All right.
Well, I'll chime in there. Yeah. No, this was it was great. I really appreciate, because it's such a under-talked about portion of the work that is so large. Yeah. Really great. I guess one curiosity is when you're working with clients that don't have an internal audio team and you're kind of stuck throwing assets over the wall, but then wanting to be responsible for the game sounding good, even though you aren't in charge of implementation. How do you do that dialogue of, hey, here's the revisions that we need to make, or the mix changes that need to be made? How does that dialogue work when there's no internal audio team, but you still kind of need to make those decisions?
I'm going to grab just like from the very beginning, going back to so much of what happens down the road could have been worked out in the very beginning. When somebody comes to me and says, listen, we don't have an audio director, we don't have an audio team, can I show you my game? Can you help us? can you basically play the role of an audio director and tell us where we need sound in our game? We can do that, but you could probably bring somebody in freelance and pay somebody to just get we can tell you how things should be organized and what information we need from you. You could, I suppose, pay us to do it, or you could pay somebody else. But to have all that organized and just take those steps to organize yourself is going to help us be able to work very efficiently. And we've been doing this a long time, and we can kind of anticipate the problems that we're going to have, and we build in the front time for revisions and fixes and iterations. So when we get to the end, there's no surprises. I mean, there are projects that go over, but it's usually because the visuals are late. That's the number one reason.
And another thing I'll answer to this on the creative management side, and that is, and it's funny, we have the same problems. I've done big CG movies, and I've done games, and it's the same problem. It's the exact same problem in every industry. The big question that I ask is, what is your CG schedule? It's not my schedule, it's your schedule. And it's not even when you want it, it's when are the artists going to be done? When's the particle effects happening? When's the animation happening? Let me understand that timeline and that pipeline on your project, and then we can talk about audio.
And people often will ask us, well, you can start way before that, right? You can start working on it before all that's done. It's why would you want us to do it over again?
In the last 6 months, for some reason, I've had a handful of projects. They go, let me describe it to you. It'll be this, 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 and this. And you go, yeah, I need to see motion. I need to see animation, because I'm syncing things to visuals. Yeah. You can describe it all you want, but if we can't see it, let's not spend the time. And that's where the budgets get really big. Sometimes, I mean, I did a movie called Pacific.
Amen.
Yeah. I mean, I did Pacific Rim, and we got animation the Thursday before the Monday mix. So we had a long time on the project, but it was like, oh crap, all this animation just happened, and we have 3 days to make it amazing, which, you don't sleep for, 3 days.
And one of the things, like you touched on, like how do you ask, what do you like mix fixes or things like that if there's no audio team? One of the things that I know we've done in the past, working on when their audio team is sometimes even just really busy, and they just want us to kind of figure it out, is we'll try to ask like who's implementing, because the thing is that there have been many times we've gotten sheets and they said, hey, we need a sound for this, and we look at it and we go, you kind of need a loop for that. And you kind of need a loop and maybe an end. And we're thinking that because we know how the game engine works, but then I don't know how their game engine's working. So I'll ask the implementer, hey, question for you. Look at this animation. Would a loop, can you make it work? Like, do you have the coding to do a loop and a loop end? Because I think that would work better and give you, and if he looks at it and goes, you know what? We don't have the time to write more code, or we don't have this, just give us that, no problem. Or, you know what? That would work much better. Yes, and we do that. We kind of fluid level, and we'll update our sheets and update our assets and say, what's possible, and how can we help make it better?
And we've done projects where people are trying to launch games, especially mobile, and we will help them, guide them through the landmines. I mean, we do have a lot of experience. We've done a lot of projects, so we know what to stay away from. But everyone's got their own style, and our job is not for you to figure out our style. Our job is to figure out your style, and the way you like to work, and the logic in which, the way you think. The last thing I will bring up, and I know we're out of time, but is when you're doing AR and VR, the last thing you do not have a conversation is what audio engine you're going to use, or spatial engine, most importantly. And I see that happening a lot. Or what format do you want to deliver on? And of course, the answer is everything. So, this seems to be a reoccurring issue. So it's something that we try to press our clients. Or I love the question, well, what would you like to release on? Which audio format would you like? And we're like, what are you releasing on? Are you doing Facebook? Are you doing Google? Do you have your own app? Are you going to be a theme park? Are we doing something custom? What are we doing? Where are we going? What is the technology?
And do we have the tech to make it happen? There are so many times we've done spatial mixes and then found out they didn't get the spatial plugin for it, and they're out of time and out of budget, and in the end, we spent hours upon hours making a spatial mix to deliver stereo, which is fine, but it's wasted, It's like it can't be done. Just can your tech handle it? That's a big question.
Yeah. And creatively, all the things we've spoken about has to come to a conclusion, has to come to an ending. And that is, what do you want to end up with? And then we kind of reverse engineer it and say, how do we get there? What technology do we use? How much time do we have? How much budget do we have? What's the priorities and sounds? And these are the things. We will not compromise on making great sounds, but we need to do time management. We need to be smart. And that's the biggest thing that I always say to all my clients. Let's work smart. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole with you. I will fight you to going down a place that's going to hurt you.
It's expensive.
You know, yeah, I mean, some people, years ago I did a Disney project, and I said, I can get it done in 10 weeks. They said, we need you for 20 weeks because of the approval process. And I said, I get it. And that's kind of a different discussion on how we're here for as long as you need us. And sometimes we've been on for years. It really depends on what the approval process, which I think Debbie said early on.
Yeah, I mentioned it briefly, but yeah, if you know going in that you have layers of people above you that you have to get approval from, you have to build that into your schedule because you're going to need time to get that feedback. And you know there's going to be fixes and changes, so it has to be built in.
Any more quick questions?
We are out of time.
Out of time.
Got to get David set up.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you guys so much.